They don't tell you what really happens during the night shift at the Rolex factory. They don't warn you about the machines that keep running even after you cut the power. They don't explain why the factory floor sometimes stretches for miles when it should only be a few hundred feet. They don't tell you why the watch hands move backward at exactly 3:15 a.m. or why, no matter how many employees punch in at night, there are always fewer by morning. But the worst part? The rules. The 5 terrifying absolute rules you must follow to survive. Break one, and you don't go missing. Something else will take your place. And I think tonight, it's coming for me. I started working at the Rolex factory's night shift 3 nights ago. I needed the money, and the job seemed simple: assembly line work, handling delicate watch parts, ensuring nothing was defective. Easy. But the building itself was wrong. The floor felt like it was breathing under my boots. The machinery wasn't just loud, it was rhythmic, like a pulse. The walls, lined with rows and rows of Rolex clocks, seemed to move slightly when I wasn't looking. I should have walked out that first night. Instead, I stayed. And that's when my supervisor, Mr. Delacroix, handed me a small, folded slip of paper. Read it. Memorize it. Follow every word. His voice was flat, but his fingers trembled as he handed me the note. I unfolded it, my stomach twisting as I read. The Rolex factory night shift rules. Rule number 1. Never look at the second hand on any Rolex clock. If it stops moving, do not react. Rule number 2. If a machine starts running on its own, keep working. Do not touch it. Do not turn around. Rule 3. If you hear footsteps behind you but know no one is there, leave your station immediately. Rule number 4. At exactly 3:15 a.m., no matter what you hear, see, or feel, do not move. Do not breathe too loudly. Do not blink more than once. Rule number 5. If someone who isn't on the shift speaks to you, do not answer. They are not supposed to be here. I laughed nervously. This is a joke, right? Delacroix didn't smile. His face was pale, his lips dry and cracked. Pray you never find out. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the clocks. I glanced up at the nearest Rolex clock on the wall. Its golden hands gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The second hand moved smoothly, tick, 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 just as it should. I exhaled. Maybe it really was just factory superstition? Maybe. For the first hour, nothing happened. I worked silently, placing delicate gears into their casings, watching other workers move in perfect sync. Too perfect, like they weren't thinking at all. No one spoke. No one even looked at each other. And then I heard it. A metallic click from behind me. One of the machines, a massive conveyor belt that had been powered off, roared to life on its own. The gears ground together, the metal arms swinging in precise motions, but no one was operating it. The rule flashed in my mind. Rule number 2. If a machine starts running on its own, keep working. Do not touch it. Do not turn around. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to keep assembling the watch in front of me. The machine groaned. The gears twisted violently, as if something was inside them, trying to get out. A low whisper slithered through the air, brushing against my ear like a breath. I clenched my teeth and kept working. The whisper came again. It said my name. I gripped the watch so hard my knuckles turned white. After a few more agonizing seconds, the machine abruptly shut off. Silence. I exhaled shakily. But when I glanced at the workstation across from me, my stomach dropped. The man who had been working there was gone. His chair was empty, his tools neatly placed, as if he had never existed. No one reacted. I turned to the worker next to me, a man named Elias. Did you see? His hand snapped to my wrist, gripping me with terrifying strength. Don't. His voice was empty, his eyes locked straight ahead. I swallowed. I understood immediately. Rule number 3. If you hear footsteps behind you but know no one is there, leave your station immediately. I hadn't left my station. I had stayed, and someone else had paid for it. I tried to focus, but something felt off. I glanced at my watch. 3:14 a.m. My pulse spiked. I didn't know what happened at 3:15 a.m., but the rule had been clear. Do not move. The factory hummed louder, the walls vibrating. The air thickened, pressing against my skin. The workers around me froze, their eyes fixed on their stations. The lights flickered. A sharp metallic screech echoed through the factory, like nails on steel. Then, a hand slid over my shoulder. It was cold, wet, heavy. Something breathed against the back of my neck. A whisper, low, guttural. You're not supposed to be here. I felt teeth pressing lightly against my skin. I clenched my fists, didn't move, didn't breathe. The thing behind me let out a low chuckle. Then, it let go. The lights flickered once, twice, and everything returned to normal. I was still alive. For now. The air still felt thick, suffocating, like whatever had been behind me hadn't fully left. My skin was damp with sweat, and the cold imprint of its fingers still lingered on my shoulder. The factory was silent again, the humming of the machines back to their usual rhythm, but I knew what had just happened was real. I had survived 3:15 a.m. My breath came in short, uneven gasps, but I forced myself to move, to pretend everything was normal. I could feel eyes on me, not from the workers, but from something else, something still watching. I looked at the man next to me, Elias, his face pale and hollow, hands moving mechanically as he worked. He had known. He had warned me. I swallowed hard. I wanted to ask him what would have happened if I had moved, but I already knew the answer. I wouldn't be here anymore. Time dragged on after that, but the terror never faded. I became hyper-aware of every sound, every shift in the air. My hands trembled as I continued assembling the delicate parts, but I forced myself to focus. Then I made a mistake. I glanced at the Rolex clock hanging on the far wall. The moment my eyes landed on it, my stomach lurched. The second hand, it wasn't moving. I felt a sharp pressure behind my eyes, a pulse of something wrong spreading through my skull. My instincts screamed at me to look away, but I couldn't. The second hand had stopped exactly at 3:15 a.m. But that was impossible. I had just survived that moment. It had passed, and yet the clock was frozen. A whisper curled through my mind, something cold and ancient, words that didn't belong to this world. It knows you saw. My entire body locked up. The rule. Never look at the second hand on any Rolex clock. If it stops moving, do not react. I had already broken it. I forced my expression to stay blank, but my heartbeat was erratic, hammering against my ribs. I tore my gaze away from the clock, back to my hands, willing myself to keep working, to keep acting normal. But the room had changed. The hum of the machines had turned into a slow, distorted warble, like something was dragging time itself through mud. The workers around me still moved, but their motions weren't right anymore. Their heads were tilted at odd angles. Their movements were delayed, out of sync, as if they were being controlled by something that didn't understand how humans worked. Elias was the only one who still looked normal. His hands were tight around his tools, but his knuckles were white. He knew. He knew I had broken the rule. I didn't dare move my head, but from the corner of my vision, I saw something. A shadow, stretching unnaturally along the floor, moving against the light. It was coming from behind me. I kept working. I kept working even though I could feel it creeping closer. It wasn't footsteps this time. It was something worse, the absence of sound, the air around me distorting like a ripple in reality. My vision blurred for half a second, and when it cleared, the workstation beside me was empty. The man who had been there was gone. I didn't hear him leave. I didn't see him leave. He had just ceased to exist. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, forcing myself to keep going, to act like I hadn't seen anything. The factory lights flickered once, twice. Then they cut out completely. A sharp gasp choked in my throat, but I swallowed it down. The darkness was absolute, the kind that didn't feel natural. I wasn't alone in it. I felt them all around me. I could hear their ragged, shallow breathing. Something brushed against my arm, a voice, too close, too cold. "You're not supposed to be here." I squeezed my eyes shut. I couldn't move. I couldn't react. Another voice, this one from my right. "You saw it." My fingers curled into a fist. I stayed still. I didn't speak. But the voices didn't stop. They were getting closer, pressing against me from all sides, whispering things I couldn't understand, words that made my head pound. Then, a hand closed around my wrist. I nearly screamed, but I bit my tongue hard enough to draw more blood. My skin burned where it touched me, something wet and wrong seeping into my bones. I wanted to rip my arm away, but I knew. If I moved, if I acknowledged them, I wouldn't exist anymore. I don't know how long it lasted. Time stretched, warped, collapsed into itself. Then, the lights came back on. The factory was exactly the same. The workers moved like nothing had happened. The machines whirred in perfect rhythm. But I knew it wasn't over. I looked down at my wrist. A handprint had been burned into my skin. The shape of it wasn't human. Elias finally turned to me, his expression as hollow as ever, and whispered under his breath, "You need to leave." But I couldn't. The doors wouldn't open until the shift ended. And something told me that I wouldn't make it that long. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The imprint on my wrist burned, a sickening reminder that I had broken a rule, that something had touched me. Elias's whisper still clung to my ears. You need to leave. But there was nowhere to go. The doors wouldn't open until the shift ended. I was trapped. And they knew it. The factory hummed around me, the machines whirring in perfect rhythmic cycles, but the normality of it felt wrong. Like the entire place was pretending, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to slip up again. I looked down at my hands. They were still shaking. I tried to focus, to keep assembling the delicate watch parts in front of me, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying what had just happened. The lights going out, the voices in the dark, the feeling of something gripping my wrist. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste blood. I had survived 2 rules so far. Barely. But I wouldn't last the entire shift. Not if they were watching me now. I forced myself to work. My hands moved on instinct, but my senses were sharp, hyper-aware of every small detail around me. I refused to look at the Rolex clock again. I wouldn't make that mistake twice. A few minutes passed, maybe more. Then, just as my heartbeat started to slow, the machine at the workstation across from me turned on by itself. The mechanical whirring sliced through the silence, sudden and jarring. It was an older machine, one of the ones used to polish the finer details of the Rolex pieces, but no one was touching it. No one was even standing near it. Rule number 2. If a machine starts running on its own, keep working. Do not touch it. Do not turn around. I inhaled sharply through my nose, staring hard at the small gears in my hand, forcing myself to keep moving. But the sound was deafening, an unnatural grinding noise, too loud, too close, like it was creeping toward me. I clenched my jaw. This was a test. It wanted me to react. The workers around me acted like they didn't hear it. Their hands moved in the same eerie mechanical rhythm. The only person who wasn't working was Elias. He was staring straight at me. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. But from the corner of my eye, I saw his lips move. Don't turn around. I swallowed. The noise was getting louder. I could feel something pressing against my back, like the machine wasn't on the workstation anymore. Like it was right behind me, grinding, whirring, breathing. A cold shiver rolled down my spine. Machines weren't supposed to breathe. My fingers trembled. I forced myself to keep assembling, to keep my eyes locked on the parts in front of me, but it was getting harder. The noise turned into a sharp, metallic shriek. Something wet and hot dripped onto my shoulder. I flinched. No, don't react! Don't react! The factory lights flickered. The machine's noise became a garbled mess of whispers. It was speaking, not in a language I understood, not in a voice that sounded remotely human. And then, it stopped. The machine cut off. The noise died. The weight behind me vanished like it had never been there at all. I exhaled shakily, my hands still locked in place, refusing to move even though my entire body was trembling. I risked a glance at Elias. He was still watching me, his face unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, something that looked almost like pity. I didn't have time to question it, because then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, right behind me. I stiffened. My stomach turned to ice. Rule number 3. If you hear footsteps behind you but know no one is there, leave your station immediately. The footsteps stopped. The air around me felt thick, suffocating, charged with something I couldn't see. I pushed back my chair. My legs were numb, but I forced them to move, standing up too quickly. The moment I did, the pressure in the air shifted. I wasn't alone. I felt it. I didn't look. I didn't check. I just walked. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. Elias didn't stop me. He didn't even look up. The factory floor stretched ahead, the fluorescent lights buzzing above. I tried to keep my breathing even, to act normal, but I could feel it. The footsteps were following me. They weren't hurried, they weren't rushed, but they were too close. I turned a corner, my pulse hammering in my ears. The air was stale, the metal scent of the factory clinging to my tongue. I reached the end of the hallway, heart pounding, ready to turn again. And then, the lights flickered. Once, twice. And a voice whispered from behind me. You're not supposed to be here. The same words I had heard in the dark. I clenched my fists. Don't answer. Rule number 5. If someone who isn't on the shift speaks to you, do not answer. They are not supposed to be here. I didn't turn around, but I felt it. Breath against the back of my neck, the faintest pressure of fingers ghosting over my shoulder. I squeezed my eyes shut. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I stood there, silent, not daring to make a sound. The whisper came again. "You're not supposed to be here." This time, the words crawled into my skull, writhing, twisting, like they were trying to pull something out of me. I bit the inside of my cheek harder, my hands curling into fists so tight my nails dug into my skin. I couldn't answer. I wouldn't answer. Then, the presence moved away. The hallway was empty again. The air was normal. The factory hummed like nothing had happened. I staggered backward, my breath ragged, my entire body shaking. I had survived 3 rules now, but I wasn't going to make it to morning. I knew that now. And so did they. The air in the factory was still heavy, suffocating. Every sound, every faint buzz of machinery, every distant click of tools felt unnatural, like the entire building was alive, listening, waiting. My breath was unsteady, shallow. I forced myself to move, to walk toward the workstations again, but my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I had survived 3 rules already, barely, but I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The factory knew I was breaking. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting sickly white beams across the polished metal floors. My station was exactly as I left it, my half-assembled watch pieces waiting for me like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just felt something breathing down my neck. I sat down. My fingers trembled as I picked up the delicate gears. I tried to pretend I was fine, that my heartbeat wasn't slamming against my ribs, that I wasn't hyper-aware of every shadow lingering in my peripheral vision. Elias was still at his station. He hadn't looked at me since I left the hallway. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. I swallowed hard, trying to slow my breathing, trying to convince myself that if I just kept working, if I just followed the damn rules, I could make it to the end of my shift. Then, the Rolex clock on the wall ticked to 3:14 a.m. My stomach dropped. Rule number 4. At exactly 3:15 a.m., no matter what you hear, see, or feel, do not move. Do not breathe too loudly. Do not blink more than once. I felt sick. My hands curled into fists, fingers slick with sweat. The seconds stretched, too slow, too long. I kept my head down. I waited. The clock ticked. 3:14 a.m. The hum of the factory shifted. The steady, rhythmic sounds of the machines became offbeat, stuttering, like something had tampered with them. A low, vibrating noise crawled through the room, rising from the walls, from the very bones of the factory itself. It didn't sound like metal. It sounded like breathing. The workers around me didn't react. Their hands moved mechanically, their expressions vacant. The tick of the Rolex clock grew louder. 3:14 a.m. And then, the lights shut off. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. I didn't move. The darkness swallowed everything. The only sound was the relentless tick, tick, tick of the clock. A cold pressure settled over my chest. It felt wrong, unnatural, like something in the factory had just woken up. I heard something shift in the dark, a footstep, then another. The air grew thick, the sensation of something enormous, something breathing, something ancient pressed down on my skin. My pulse hammered. The lights flickered back, but the factory wasn't the same anymore. The machines were motionless. The workers were gone. Only Elias and I remained. And something else. A tall, skeletal figure stood in the farthest corner of the factory, its elongated frame partially obscured by shadows. It didn't move, didn't speak, but it was looking at me. I tried to slow my breathing. Was seconds away. If I moved, if I reacted, I would break the rule. The figure took a step forward, its bones cracked. Another step. The sound it made wasn't human, it was something else, something that had existed far longer than I could comprehend. It took another step. It was too close now. The Rolex clock ticked to 3:15 a.m. The factory froze. The creature stopped walking. Its face was featureless, but I could feel its gaze locked onto me. The pressure in the air became unbearable. Then, it spoke. Not in a voice, not in words, inside my head. "You do not belong here." My throat tightened, my lungs burned. I fought the urge to gasp, to suck in air, to move. "You were not supposed to hear us." The whisper curled through my skull, stretching into something else. A sharp, burning pain. My vision swam. I forced myself to remain still. "You are not like them." The pressure was unbearable. My entire body screamed for relief, for movement, for breath. But I refused. I could not break the rule. I counted the seconds. 1. The figure took another step. 2. The air shifted. 3. The lights flickered. And then the Rolex clock ticked to 3:16 a.m. The factory snapped back to normal. The workers were back at their stations. The machines hummed. The skeletal figure was gone. My chest collapsed as I sucked in a desperate breath, my entire body trembling. The pain in my skull faded. I had survived. But as I glanced up, my breath hitched. Elias wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the Rolex clock. And for the first time since my shift began, the second hand was no longer moving. Elias didn't blink, didn't breathe. His eyes were locked onto the Rolex clock above the factory floor, where the second hand stood completely still. A sharp chill shot through my spine. Rule number 1. Never look at the second hand on any Rolex clock. If it stops moving, do not react. I forced myself to keep my expression blank, but my entire body screamed to look, to confirm that I wasn't imagining things, that time itself hadn't just stopped. Elias's fingers twitched against the metal workbench. His knuckles were white, his lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. No one else reacted. The workers around us kept assembling watches like nothing was wrong. But something was. Something was deeply, horribly wrong. The air felt wrong again. Like something invisible had shifted, altering the very fabric of the room. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered erratically, casting elongated shadows across the floor. The machines hummed softly, but their rhythm was off. Tick. The sound wasn't coming from the clock anymore. It was closer, right behind me. I gritted my teeth, my hands trembling as I forced myself to pick up another watch component. Work. Keep working. Do not react. I felt it move, a presence, something cold and vast, standing impossibly close. I could hear it breathing, slow, deliberate inhales that dragged against my ears, filling my chest with a suffocating pressure. The tick, tick, tick. It was pacing. Elias still hadn't moved. His fingers dug into the steel table, his breathing shallow, his gaze unblinking. The tick grew louder. A shape loomed in my peripheral vision, not human, too tall, too thin. Its limbs were too long, too jagged. I squeezed my eyes shut for half a second. My heart slammed against my ribs. It was watching me. I gripped my tools tighter, my pulse thundering in my ears. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but the rules were absolute. If the second hand stops, do not react. Another breath, not mine. A slow, rattling exhale that sent ice down my spine. I focused on the watch in my hands. A perfectly polished Rolex face, smooth and gleaming under the factory lights. The thing behind me moved closer. The tick, tick, tick came from its chest now, a hollow, echoing sound that reverberated in my bones. I wasn't breathing. I couldn't. My lungs refused to expand, like the air itself had thickened into something tangible, something pressing me down. The tick stopped. Elias sucked in a sharp breath. His chair scraped against the floor. I bit my tongue to stop myself from looking. Then the lights went out. A click in the darkness. Not from the machines. Not from the clock. From the thing. Elias moved. I heard the sharp sound of his chair tipping over, his hurried, panicked breaths cutting through the thick silence. And then, footsteps. But not his. Not mine. Behind us. Slow. Deliberate. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Rule number 3. If you hear footsteps behind you but know no one is there, leave your station immediately. The footsteps stopped. The lights flickered, just for a second, but in that second, I saw them. Figures, not one. A row of shadowy figures standing between the machines, each one identical, tall and thin with elongated limbs and hollowed-out faces. Their heads were tilted at an unnatural angle. Their mouths, if they had mouths, were slightly open. Watching. Waiting. The lights blinked back to life, and they were gone. Elias was already moving. He grabbed my arm, yanking me up so fast, my chair nearly toppled over. "We have to go," he hissed, his voice shaking. The workers around us continued assembling watches like nothing had happened. The second hand on the Rolex clock was moving again. My legs felt like they were filled with lead. I let Elias pull me toward the farthest hallway, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. My mind was reeling. The figures, the ticking thing, the stopped clock. We shouldn't have survived that. Elias didn't stop until we reached the narrow employee corridor, the buzzing overhead lights casting strange shadows against the walls. He turned to face me, his hands still trembling. "You saw them, didn't you?" His voice was barely a whisper. I swallowed hard. My throat felt raw. I don't know what I saw. His jaw clenched. His gaze darted toward the hallway behind us, as if expecting something to come slithering out. "They're not supposed to be here," he muttered. "Not all at once, not like that." The weight of his words settled deep in my chest. Not all at once. I took a slow step back. "What are they?" Elias exhaled sharply. "I don't know." A lie. He knew something. His hands curled into fists, his knuckles stark white. "They don't usually show themselves unless—" He trailed off, his expression unreadable. "Unless what?" I pressed, my heart hammering. His lips parted slightly, but before he could speak, a voice echoed down the corridor. A voice that should not exist. Not here. Not now. It was light, casual, too normal. "Hey, what are you two doing here?" My stomach dropped. Rule number 5. If someone who isn't on the shift speaks to you, do not answer. They are not supposed to be here. Elias froze. My entire body went rigid. The voice was coming from the end of the hallway, just beyond the next turn. It sounded human, but we knew better. The fluorescent lights above us flickered violently, buzzing like 1,000 dying insects. Footsteps approached. Elias didn't speak. I didn't breathe. A shape emerged from the corner. I bit down on my tongue to stop myself from screaming. It was a man. Or at least, it looked like one. A factory uniform. An employee badge that didn't have a name. But his face was wrong. The features were too smooth, too symmetrical, like someone had taken a photograph of a real person and stretched it over a skull that wasn't quite human. And then he smiled. It was a perfect, flawless smile. "Hey," he said again, his voice easy, casual, too human to be real. My pulse slammed against my ribs. I knew he was waiting for a response, waiting for us to break the rule. I could feel his gaze pressing into me, sharp and expectant. Elias didn't move. I didn't blink. The silence stretched. Too long. Too heavy. And then, the not man's smile twitched, just slightly, and his jaw unhinged. A wet, cracking sound filled the narrow hallway as his mouth stretched too wide, peeling open in a slow, unnatural split. The smile never faded. It only widened, revealing rows of flat uniform teeth, each one too perfect, too identical, like they had been stamped into place. Elias and I did not move. The rule was clear. Do not answer. But the thing in front of us wanted one. Its head tilted in slow, mechanical jerks, the skin around its mouth stretching, splitting at the corners. Something dark and oily dripped down its chin. The silence was unbearable. And then it spoke again. "Hey," it said, voice still friendly, still wrong. "What are you two doing here?" The same exact words, the same tone. Like a recording on loop, but the lips didn't match the words this time. They hung open, still stretched too wide, still leaking. Elias was trembling. I could hear it, even if I couldn't see him. The buzzing overhead lights flickered violently, casting jittery shadows against the walls. The knot man took a step closer. Its foot hit the floor, but there was no sound. Not even a whisper of movement. Elias exhaled, just barely, almost imperceptible, but it heard him. The head snapped toward him. Fast. Too fast. The thing's face jerked unnaturally, eyes locking onto him in one sharp motion. Its mouth froze, still hanging wide, still leaking. It took another step. Elias's hand brushed against mine. Just a twitch, a silent warning. Run. But we couldn't. We hadn't broken the rule, not yet. And then the thing changed. Its face shifted, like someone had grabbed the skin and pushed it into a new shape. The smooth, eerie blankness collapsed inward, morphing, reforming. And then I saw my own face. The thing was now wearing my face. Perfectly. It smiled. I smiled. My stomach turned to ice. The eyes were wrong. The expression was wrong. It was like something had studied me in a mirror and gotten close, but not close enough. And then it spoke again, but this time, it used my voice. "Hey, Elias," it said. "What are you two doing here?" My blood went cold. The way it said Elias's name, too personal, too knowing. Elias stiffened. The thing took another step. Closer. It was daring him to respond. Daring him to break the rule. The lights overhead popped, sending sparks down the hallway. For a split second, we were in total darkness. A breath, not mine. Not Elias's. Then, the lights came back. It was even closer, an inch from Elias's face. It grinned, wearing my skin, my mouth, my teeth. Elias bolted. I followed before I even had time to think. We sprinted down the hallway, the factory walls blurring past us. The lights overhead flickered faster, buzzing, distorting reality itself. I heard it behind us. The sound it made wasn't running. It was gliding. like it had no bones, no weight. A single skittering scrape of movement, like something dragging itself closer without ever touching the floor. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Elias yanked me through the break room door, slamming it behind us. We collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. The silence was suffocating. My pulse was hammering in my ears, and then tap, tap, tap at the door, slow, deliberate. And then in my own voice, "Hey, Elias, what are you two doing here?" My throat closed. I saw Elias's hands clench into fists, his breathing ragged, his entire body shaking. The not man was right outside. We didn't move. The door handle rattled. "Hey, Elias," it said again, softer this time. "What are you two doing here?" The words warped, glitching slightly, as if struggling to hold their shape. I couldn't see it. Not in the normal way. The darkness was absolute, thicker than it should have been, but I felt it shift, felt the pressure of its presence like a tangible weight pressing against my skull. It was watching me. It knew I was here. A sound broke through the silence, a slow, wet inhale. Not from Elias, not from me, from it. The air was thick with the scent of rust and damp earth, as if something had crawled up from the dirt beneath the factory floor and was standing right in front of me. A voice, low, warped, ancient. "You shouldn't be here." The exact same words as before, but this time they were closer. I felt something cold brush against my arm. A touch, but not a hand. Something rough, uneven, almost jagged. I clenched my jaw so tight I thought my teeth would shatter. I couldn't move. Not yet, not until 3:16. But it wanted me to. The thing in the dark shifted again, and then something pressed against my chest. A weight, crushing and unbearable, as if something was trying to push itself inside me. I felt my ribs strain, my lungs locked. A whisper crawled through the air, curling into my ear. "Let me in." I bit down on my tongue hard enough to taste blood. The rule. Follow the rule. I couldn't move. Not yet. Elias was beside me, silent, frozen. I could feel his arm just barely touching mine, both of us locked in place, trapped in the dark with something that wasn't supposed to exist. The thing exhaled. Cold, damp, rotten. A sick, crawling sensation spread across my skin, like something was brushing against every inch of me at once. Then, it started to hum, a low, vibrating sound, deep and inhuman. My ears rang. It was inside my head. And then, the clock ticked. 3:16 a.m. The air shifted. The presence was gone. The lights blinked back on. The room was empty. But something was wrong. Elias was still standing beside me, but he wasn't breathing. I turned my head, slowly, cautiously. His eyes were open wide, pupils blown out, his entire body locked like he was still trapped in the moment before 3:16. My stomach twisted. "Elias?" I whispered. No reaction. His chest didn't move. His fingers were stiff, curled into his palms like he was gripping onto something that wasn't there anymore. I reached out, hesitating, then shook his arm. He collapsed, like a puppet with its strings cut. I barely caught him before he hit the ground. His body was ice cold. A single breath rattled out of him, shallow and fragile. His lips parted slightly. I leaned in, heart pounding. And then, in a voice that was not his own, he whispered, "It's still here." My hands went numb. Elias's eyes rolled back, and his entire body convulsed. I nearly dropped him. His limbs twitched violently, snapping at unnatural angles, his breath coming in short, choked gasps. And then, just as suddenly as it started, he stopped. His body sagged in my arms, completely limp. I shook him again, panic rising in my throat. "Elias!" His eyelids fluttered. His body twitched, his fingers flexing weakly. And then he gasped. A desperate, ragged inhale, like someone drowning finally breaking the surface. His eyes flew open. And for a second, they weren't his. I knew they weren't his. They were too dark, too hollow, too empty. And then he blinked. The wrongness was gone. His chest heaved, his face contorted with confusion, fear, and something else, something deeper. He looked at me, eyes darting wildly. "We need to leave," he croaked. I nodded, still gripping his arm, trying to keep him steady. But as I did, something caught my eye. The break room door. It was open. It had been locked. I was sure of it. But now it hung ajar, revealing the darkened hallway beyond. Something had been here. Something had left, or worse, something had gotten in. A distant sound echoed from down the corridor, a hollow tapping. like fingernails against metal. It was coming from the main floor, from the machines. Elias and I exchanged a look. We knew what it meant. Rule number 2. If a machine starts running on its own, keep working. Do not touch it. Do not turn around. I swallowed hard. We have to go back out there, I whispered. Elias didn't answer, he just nodded. We stepped toward the door into the dimly lit hallway. The factory floor stretched out before us, rows of towering machines looming in the shadows, and then a conveyor belt whirred to life. By itself. Elias and I froze. Another machine clanked loudly, gears grinding as it sputtered to life, steam hissing from unseen pipes. One by one, the machines woke up. The factory groaned, metal creaking and whining, as if the building itself was coming alive. A shadow moved. I saw it, just for a second. A shape shifting between the machinery, too fast to track. Then, a voice, low, garbled. It wasn't coming from a person, it was coming from the machines. They were whispering. The grinding of gears twisted into something almost like words, layered beneath the mechanical hum. Something was inside the machines. Or worse, the machines were speaking. And then, the footsteps started, slow, deliberate, behind us. Elias's hand clamped down on my wrist. I knew the rule. If you hear footsteps behind you but know no one is there, leave your station immediately. The machines weren't the real threat. The footsteps were. We turned. We ran. But as we did, I made a mistake. A split-second, instinctive mistake. I looked. Just a glance over my shoulder. And what I saw was not human. It was standing in the center of the factory floor. It was watching us, and it was smiling, not in a way a person smiles. There was no warmth, no expression behind it. Just a wide, stretching grin, too sharp, too deep, too wrong. The corners of its mouth curled unnaturally high, like something had pulled its face apart and left it stuck that way. And its eyes? It didn't have any. Just black pits sunk too far into its skull, hollow and endless. Elias grabbed my arm. Don't stop. Just run. I barely felt my legs as we bolted through the factory. The machines clanked and roared around us, spewing steam. That's metal grinding against metal like they were screaming. The footsteps, they followed. Fast. Too fast. It wasn't walking anymore. It was chasing. I could hear it now. Its breath. A wet, gurgling inhale. The sound of something that had forgotten how to breathe like a person. The hallway was ahead. Our only way out. We sprinted toward it, my lungs burning, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. I could hear Elias gasping beside me, both of us running on pure adrenaline, pure terror. And then, the emergency lights flickered. Just for a second. Just long enough for everything to go dark. And in that second, something grabbed my wrist. I felt it, bone-thin fingers digging into my skin. Cold, wrong. I screamed. The lights came back. There was nothing there. But the mark remained, an ice-cold imprint against my flesh, a phantom touch that refused to fade. We reached the hallway, turning the corner so fast I nearly slammed into the wall. Elias stumbled beside me, grabbing my shoulder to keep himself upright. His face was pale, his pupils blown wide, his chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. What the hell was that? He rasped. I shook my head. I didn't know. I didn't want to know. But then, we heard it. Not behind us. Ahead. A sound. Tap, tap, tap. Fingernails against metal. We both froze. It was coming from the break room. The door was still wide open. Elias shot me a look, his jaw clenched. We were trapped. Go forward, or go back toward that thing. There was no good option. Then, a whisper. Low. Crooked. You're late. Not a person's voice. Something else. Something waiting for us. My blood turned to ice. Elias gritted his teeth. We have to go through. He was right. There was no other way. I swallowed back the rising panic in my throat and stepped forward. The room was dim, the single flickering bulb above casting long, warped shadows. The air was thick, too still. The tapping continued. I turned my head, breath lodged in my chest. And then I saw it. A hand. Not attached to a body, just a hand resting on the break room table. Fingers long, bony, twitching slightly. The skin was grayish, stretched too tight over the bones. The fingernails, blackened, splintered. It wasn't there before, but it was there now, twitching, moving, like it was trying to stand on its fingers. Then it skittered across the table, straight toward me. I barely had time to react. Elias yanked me backward, and the thing hit the floor with a sickening slap. It didn't stop. It crawled, dragging itself across the ground toward us. Elias kicked it, hard. The hand slammed against the wall and fell limp. For a second, neither of us moved. Then it twitched, fingers flexing like it was waking up. I grabbed Elias's arm. Go, now. We bolted. Out of the break room, down the hallway, past the humming machines. The footsteps had stopped. But that didn't mean we were alone. We reached the front entrance. The heavy metal doors loomed ahead, locked tight from the inside. Elias fumbled in his pocket, pulling out the key. His hands were shaking so bad he dropped it. The key clattered against the floor. A second later, a voice. Right behind us. You forgot something. My stomach dropped. Elias didn't move. I didn't move. We knew the rule. Rule number 5. If someone who isn't on the shift speaks to you, do not answer. They are not supposed to be here. I squeezed my eyes shut. Don't speak. Don't move. Don't react. The voice came again, closer this time. That's not polite. Cold breath slid against the back of my neck. I clenched my jaw, every muscle in my body screaming to run, to turn, to see who was speaking. Then, a whisper so close it felt like it was inside my ear. Look at me. A single finger traced down my spine. I nearly choked on my own breath. Then, the key. It slid across the floor, stopping against Elias's foot. A sickening, mocking gesture. Elias bent, slowly, carefully. He picked up the key. His fingers fumbled against the lock. A click. The door swung open, and then everything went silent. The factory stopped. The machines, the whispers, the footsteps, the air itself felt like it held its breath. I stepped through the door. Elias followed. The second our feet hit the pavement outside, the door slammed shut behind us. And then, a final whisper from the other side. See you tomorrow. The words clung to the air, thick and unnatural, like they had weight. Like they weren't just words, but something alive. Something that could crawl into your head and stay there. The door had slammed behind us, sealing us outside. But that didn't mean we were safe. Elias and I stood in the empty lot, chests heaving, our bodies shaking from adrenaline and fear. The factory loomed behind us, silent now, still, as if it had never been alive to begin with. I turned to Elias, expecting him to say something. But he was staring, his face pale, frozen. His eyes weren't on me. They were over my shoulder. I didn't want to look. I couldn't look. But I did. Slowly, carefully, I turned my head and saw the windows of the factory. Saw the dark glass reflecting the night sky. Saw the shapes standing on the other side. They were pressed against the glass, too many of them, their faces indistinct, just vague, blurry outlines, some too tall, some too thin, some crouched on all fours, watching, waiting. One of them raised a hand. Tap. The glass shuddered. Tap, tap. Elias grabbed my wrist. We need to go. I didn't argue. We backed away, never turning our backs on the factory. I didn't know if the things inside could get out, didn't want to find out. But the farther we stepped, the more that feeling of being watched grew. Like something had already left. Like something was out here with us. The parking lot stretched ahead, empty, except for our cars. But the night felt wrong. Too dark. Too quiet. I fumbled for my keys, nearly dropping them as I unlocked my car. Elias hesitated, his eyes still locked on the factory. We can't come back, he whispered. I nodded. We won't. But the second the words left my mouth, my phone rang, loud, abrupt, a shrill, piercing sound that made my heart nearly stop. Elias flinched. I checked the screen. No number, just a single word flashing. Unknown. I didn't want to answer. I had to answer. With shaking fingers, I pressed the button and lifted the phone to my ear. Silence. Then a breath, long, slow, wet, and then a whisper. You already did. The call cut off. My stomach twisted. My hands felt numb, cold. I looked at Elias. His eyes met mine, and I knew he'd heard it too. I didn't wait. I got into my car, locked the doors, started the engine. Elias did the same. I could see him through my windshield, gripping the wheel, white-knuckled, his face pale with fear. We had to leave. I threw the car into reverse, backing out so fast my tires screeched against the pavement. Elias followed. The factory shrank in the rearview mirror, disappearing into the night. But the feeling, that didn't fade. That watched feeling. That sense that something had followed us. I kept glancing at my mirrors, half expecting to see a shape sitting in my back seat, a figure crawling up from the shadows. Nothing. I kept driving. I didn't breathe until I reached my apartment. Locking the doors behind me, I collapsed onto my couch, my pulse still pounding. My body ached, my mind raced. I checked the time. 3:12 a.m. My stomach turned. 3 minutes. I wasn't in the factory anymore. The rules shouldn't apply here. But what if they did? The thought lodged in my skull like a knife. I stared at my phone, my hands trembling. 3:13 a.m. I needed to move, needed to change, shower. First, do anything to shake this feeling. 3:14 a.m. My hands tightened into fists. I wouldn't look at the time again. I would just sit, stay still. 3:15 a.m. The room shifted. The air grew heavy, a pressure, suffocating, thick, like the walls were breathing. I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't move, didn't breathe too loud, didn't blink. And then I heard it, the softest sound, right next to me, a slow, deliberate exhale. Something was here. I fought every instinct to turn my head. To look. Don't move. Don't breathe too loudly. Don't blink more than once. I stared ahead, the air pressed against me, a shape in my peripheral vision. Too tall, leaning over me, watching, a voice, too close. You forgot the rules. A long, cold fingertip pressed against my temple. I clenched my jaw. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. And then it was gone. The pressure lifted. The air cleared. The clock read 3:16 a.m. My body sagged. My lungs ached. I gasped for air, hands shaking violently. This wasn't over. The factory wasn't just in the factory anymore. I wasn't safe. I would never be safe again. And worst of all, I knew I would be back. Because no matter how much I wanted to run, I'd already broken the rules. And the rules never forgive. I sat in my apartment, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. The air was thick, heavy in my lungs. My hands trembled against my knees. I wanted to believe it was over, that if I ignored it, the feeling of something watching me would go away. But then, my phone vibrated. A single text message flashed on the screen. See you tomorrow. I nearly dropped the phone. My stomach twisted. The words were exactly the same as what I'd heard back at the factory. But it wasn't just the message. It was the time it was sent. 3:16 a.m. Something was still here. Something new. I stood, legs weak beneath me. I needed to get out, leave the city, burn the apartment down if I had to. Then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic ticking. I turned my head, pulse hammering in my ears, the Rolex clock on my wall. I never paid attention to it before. I didn't even remember buying it. But now I saw the second hand. It wasn't moving, frozen in place. And I had already looked. My blood turned to ice, my body locked up. Do not react. I forced myself to breathe slowly, steadily. I couldn't move, couldn't flinch, couldn't acknowledge it in any way. But then, the ticking started again, slow at first, then faster, faster. Each tick pounded in my skull, deafening, like it was inside my head. My vision blurred, black spots dancing at the edges. And then, the second hand lurched forward. 3:17 a.m. The air shifted. Something was in the room with me. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. A weight behind me, a presence standing too close, watching. The ticking grew erratic. Tick, tick, then silence. A breath ghosted against the back of my neck. My body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't because I had just made another mistake. I had reacted. The presence behind me moved, slowly. A shift in the air, something pressing against my back. Then, a whisper. Turn around. My throat locked. I wouldn't. I couldn't. Do not turn around. The thing behind me didn't like that. The whisper turned into laughter. Low at first, then growing, splitting into multiple voices. 1, 2, 5, all of them laughing. And then, the Rolex on the wall fell. Glass shattered across the floor. I snapped my eyes shut, heart pounding so violently I thought it might stop. I wasn't in control anymore. They were. I had broken too many rules. The air grew suffocating. My head spun. I stumbled forward, my body moving on its own. My vision blurred, the apartment around me melting away. No, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was back in the factory. The walls stretched endlessly around me, metal groaning like it was alive. The machines rumbled in the distance, gears turning on their own. I wasn't alone. Shapes stood in the shadows, not moving, not breathing, watching. And in the center of the room, Elias. His back was to me, his posture unnatural, stiff. I stepped forward. Elias? His head snapped to the side, not turned, snapped. Like something had twisted his neck too far. I froze. His face, it wasn't right. His eyes were too dark, too wide. His mouth was split open in a grin, too many teeth glinting in the dim light. Not Elias. I took a step back. His body moved, a jolt, a twitch, like a puppet whose strings had been yanked. Then he spoke. But it wasn't his voice. It was mine. You already broke the rules. My stomach dropped. There's no leaving now. A machine whirred to life beside me. Gears spinning, grinding, sparks flying. More machines turned on. The factory was waking up. The shadows in the corners shifted. They weren't shadows, they were things. Tall. Wrong. Their limbs too long, too thin. Their heads tilted at unnatural angles, they stepped closer. I ran. My feet pounded against the metal floor. The halls stretched, twisted. No matter which way I turned, the machines ran. The footsteps followed. The whispers never stopped. I wasn't getting out. And then, I saw it. A door. I lunged for it, fingers scrambling at the handle. But before I could pull it open, a hand gripped my wrist. Cold. Fingers too long. Too many joints. It yanked me back. I hit the ground hard, gasping. The figures closed in. A voice, not mine, not Elias's. Something else. There are no second chances. My vision flickered. Darkness crawled at the edges. The last thing I saw was the Rolex clock on the far wall. The second hand frozen. The last thing I heard was the ticking. Growing louder and louder, and then silence. I never left the factory. Not really. And now I never will.